Good morning and welcome to Breaking Points. Krystal, thanks for stepping in Ryan's stead today.
My pleasure. We're mixing it up this week. Tomorrow will be me and Ryan with the commie takeover, so everybody get excited for that.
I love that we're calling it the commie takeover. It's how I have always identified it in my head, but now that it's official.
We're just making it public now, yes.
I love it. All right, so if you want to get the whole gang's Friday show experience, make sure you're subscribed over at breakingpoints.com because that's where, soccer pops in sometimes too. We've got Griffin most Fridays, Krystal, so we're having lots of fun. You get the second half of that show in addition to early, and actually you just get the second half of the show. Nobody else gets to see it unless you're a premium subscriber. That's right. So make sure to subscribe over there in addition to getting the show early every single day in your inbox over on breakingpoints.com. Big news week, Krystal. Obviously, the UN General Assembly is going down, and Donald Trump had a hell of a speech yesterday. Trumpian in all of the most predictable ways, and yet still managed to surprise me. I don't know about you, Krystal. that was something else.
I don't know what surprises me anymore, but yeah, it was, there was an escalator scandal that we'll get to the bottom of as well. There was a teleprompter scandal that we can dig into. So a lot of moving pieces there, let's say.
Wow.
Or not moving.
What a pun. I thought you did that on purpose. That was amazing. Okay. Well, Krystal, maybe you should be writing jokes for Kimmel. I think they might be better if you're writing jokes for Kimmel.
Writing dad jokes for Ryan maybe is more like it.
See, Ryan doesn't need a writer. They're all right off the dome. It's incredible what he's capable of. Jimmy Kimmel returned to the airwaves last night, although not everyone's airwaves because Sinclair and Nexstar affiliates are still not running Kimmel. But we have a breakdown of Kimmel's return, what he said, how the president responded, and where we go from here. Kamala Harris is on a book tour. She has a book called 107 Days Out and is basically face planting in every major media appearance that she does. So we have some interesting updates on that front. Looking like
it's very on brand for her. That's just kind of what she does. That's her thing. Doing a terrible job in interviews.
And I'm excited for this segment and also the segment we're going to do on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Krystal, to get some of your insights on where Democrats are right now. It looks like AOC is teaming up with Gavin Newsom to take on some of the redistricting fights. So that'll be, I'm eager to hear what you think of that, Krystal, because there's all kinds of stuff to dive into. Juan David Rojas is joining us to discuss his new compact piece on Argentina, which is getting a U.S. bailout as the market started to dip. We have some updates on the Milei situation, and Krystal, also some updates from Turning Point USA World on what was going on behind the scenes as it relates to Israel, Charlie Kirk, in the weeks and months before his death.
Yeah, very interesting revelations there from one of Charlie's closest friends and executive producer. Obviously, there's been great interest in the pressure that Charlie was under in his final months, especially after Netanyahu came out and tried to claim him as his firmest and strongest and constant ally, and really, used Charlie's legacy and mold it for his own aims. So in any case, some interesting revelations there that kind of backs up some reporting from Max Blumenthal over at Gray Zone. So we'll get into all of that. I'm sure people will be quite interested.
That's right. Let's start with the United Nations speech yesterday that Donald Trump gave, and also some updates on Trump and Ukraine. He sat down with Zelensky yesterday and then posted on Truth Social. So we're going to get into all of that. But first, Krystal, the way that I understood Donald Trump's speech, or the way that I came to frame in my own mind, and as I was digesting it, his speech was that on the one hand, he's making this deep structural criticism of the geopolitical elite of the United Nations. He's doing it, as people will hear in just one moment, to their faces. And then he's also swinging for the fences and looking for a Nobel Peace Prize. So it's an interesting combination of goals.
Good point.
Let's go ahead and roll this compilation of some of the big moments from the speech.
Your countries are being ruined. The United Nations is funding an assault on Western countries and their borders. In 2024, the UN budgeted $372 million in cash assistance to support an estimated 624,000 migrants journeying into the United States. I'm not mentioning names. I see it, and I could call every single one of them out. You're destroying your countries. They're being destroyed. Europe is in serious trouble. They've been invaded by a force of illegal aliens like nobody's ever seen before. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell. The American public agrees with it. I mean, I was very proud to see this morning I have the highest poll numbers I've ever had. Part of it is because of what we've done on the border. I guess the other part is what we've done in the economy. It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. Climate change, no matter what happens, you're involved in that. No more global warming, no more global cooling. All of these predictions made by the United Nations and many others, often for bad reasons, were wrong. They were made by stupid people that have cost their countries fortunes and given those same countries no chance for success. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail.
So an absolute banger, as everyone just heard.
Yeah, indeed. Telling every other country that they're destroying their countries, they're going to hell. I mean, just think about Trump's record here and what he's done to this country. One of the things we consider covering is you now have 60+% of Americans saying they're worse off this year than they were previously. Wrong track numbers are off the charts. So just in terms of the well-being of Americans in the here and now, Trump's complete disasters. I don't think he's in any condition or in any position to lecture the rest of the world, not to mention the undermining of what, in my opinion, are some of the best things about America, the freedoms we enjoy, the freedom of speech, the sense that, the government is going to aspire to be neutral, that there's going to be representative government. And then you also have on the geopolitical stage, which is very relevant, of course, at the UN, him effectively aligning the entire world against us and, hastening the rise of a multipolar world, which, hey, may actually end up being better for the world, but maybe not best for American interests. So that's one thing. The other thing that is galling to me, Emily, is the two major policy themes were around climate change, which he considers to be a complete and total hoax, and then migration. And I think you and I are probably on a different place on migration, but perhaps this part you could agree with, which I don't know if there's any country in the world that is more committed to creating migration crises than the United States of America. I mean, we are currently working with Israel to try to expel all 2 million Palestinians from Gaza to go somewhere else. We are threatening Venezuela right now with another regime change war. And, certainly the list could go on of places where we have created tumult and turmoil and, the conditions for refugee crises, Syria being a key one among them, which is, part of what upended European politics. I wanted to ask you, too, about the climate change piece. It seems to me that there was a time when Republicans were all in on climate change as a hoax. Then it felt a little bit like we better at least acknowledge this is real while throwing up a million roadblocks to not do anything about it. And now we're back with Trump just full on being like, this is a hoax. There's nothing to see here. And you guys are destroying your countries in service of something that's completely fake.
I don't know if that endures beyond Trump, to be honest. I mean, it's hard to say, but when you look at the kind of next generation of Republican politicians, especially like a J.D. Vance, who's kind of from tech world, my assumption is that nobody is going to get on the climate change bandwagon, but will probably be a bit more, I don't know, maybe nuanced is the word, because they're also tied into the business community, which has some obviously serious concerns in front of them when it comes to different changes, obviously, that they have to worry about. If they're, real estate, if they're in different businesses, it matters to them. Also on the migration point, I think that just captures Trump in a nutshell. And for me, it captures but it's so representative of my entire reaction to that speech, which is he's saying some things about the United Nations that are just like right on the money, and it's satisfying as someone on the right to see them being said to the face of the United Nations, where he's like, at one point, what is the point of the United Nations, or like, what is the purpose of the United Nations? He's like, what do you guys actually do? Which, again, as someone on the right, is fairly satisfying to hear that from a United States president. On the other hand, on just the migration issue alone, agree with your critiques, and then also agree with the critique of the United Nations, which is that they were basically complicit in a lot of the trafficking that happened. I remember years ago going through their disbursements. I don't know if it was a tip or something that led me to like going through their disbursements, but it's just an incredible amount of money that's spent, for example, making it easier for people to go through the Darien Gap. And it's awful what people experience going through the Darien Gap. And people ended up coming in higher numbers as the UN was stepping in more and more to provide things like debit cards and protective measures in going through some of these parts. So it's with Trump, it's this, and I think a lot of populists have this. It's funny even on the tariffs too. You look at it and you're like, well, he's at least correct about this critique that nobody else will talk about. He's like, nobody else would say what he's saying, and then it's all, the way it manifests is just like completely insane. So you get a little satisfaction out of him being like, what are you guys doing? And then on the other hand, it's like, okay, but what are you doing?
Yeah, there was one part that was again quite galling to me on the immigration piece, because he made some comment about like, we'll be compassionate, we want to help you in your country, and I'm like, first of all, bullshit, because you're committed to waging all these regime change wars and Iran and Venezuela and, like I said, in Gaza, and not to mention his involvement, the past involvement of U.S. presidents in Syria and all of those sorts of things. But in addition, it's not like I'm the biggest USAID fan, and as a leftist, I don't have my own critique of USAID. But it is also true that the destruction of that agency has created mass harm, on a basic level in a lot of poor countries, which again can lead to, further suffering and more migration crises, if that is your concern. So I don't know. I mean, it's a fool's errand to try to wring any sort of consistency or principle from a Trumpian speech, but it was certainly, like unvarnished and insane in many ways. And like I said before, the idea that this man, who has done so much destruction to the best parts of the American project and to the, basic like livelihoods of millions of Americans who feel themselves slipping behind, see the job numbers falling off, inflation coming back, the chaos and turmoil of the tariff regime, which, if done appropriately, might have been helpful, but instead we're actually seeing a decline in manufacturing jobs. The idea of this man lecturing the rest of the world is so absurd to me.
Let's get to this escalator subplot, because it's not entirely unimportant. So we can roll A2 on the screen if you're listening and you haven't seen this clip yet. As soon as Melania Trump and Donald Trump step onto the escalator, it stops. Melania Trump kind of looks around and Donald Trump kind of looks around, and finally they just start walking up the escalator. This led to all kinds of conspiracy theories. Krystal, when an escalator at a major building, the President of the United States steps on it, with timing like that goes off, I actually do kind of understand why people are asking what's going on. We could put A2B up on the screen. It was unfortunately timed with this story from the Sunday Times that said, quote, to mark Trump's arrival, UN staff members have joked that they may turn off the escalators and elevators and simply tell him they ran out of money, so he has to walk up the stairs. And then, of course, the escalator actually did stop as the president and first lady walked onto it. Some people were taking this in a more serious direction and saying it could have been part of a nefarious potential plot to hurt Trump and the first lady in some way by causing them to stop in their tracks in a predictable way that someone could exploit. Obviously the Sunday Times says that it was part of a prank or that it may have been part of a prank, that people were joking about whether it was part of a prank. Reuters had a report, someone at the UN said it was because the UN spokesperson said it was a built-in safety mechanism on the comb step that was triggered at the top of the escalator. They're saying by Trump's videographer who was backing up to capture them going up the escalator. Unfortunate timing that there were leaks about the potential pranks, though, Krystal, in the Sunday Times.
Yeah, well, and the subtext is Trump knows he's so hated by so many people that it's entirely plausible that some intern was like, let me see if there's a way I can just like mildly fuck with this guy, you know? And then additionally, during his speech, at one portion, his teleprompter was not working. And he said something about, the teleprompter operator is going to be in big trouble. Again, if this is true, the reporting is that actually is like one of his staffers that's running the teleprompter, which would make sense because if it's your guy and you understand the speech, the cadence, like you would probably want your person in there. So in any case, I don't know if there were any conspiracies afoot, but he felt that they were. He felt targeted and aggrieved, as he often does.
One of the best Veep episodes, one of the best Veep plot lines is when this happens to Selena Meyer, and Trump handled it arguably even better. He was riffing wildly during that speech yesterday. Not surprisingly, but wildly nonetheless. And it gets to Trump's this idea that maybe it was on purpose. It's sort of like Trump's central frustration with the United Nations, which is that the United States has been the single biggest funder of the United Nations for years, is still U.S. support is a significant chunk of the UN's total budget. I think it's somewhere between 25%, so a quarter and a third. It's a huge chunk of the budget. And then you have them joking in the Sunday Times about just, flipping the switch on the escalator. It illustrates
Well, I
the
think
tensions.
that's a reference to under this Trump administration, they've withheld a significant amount of funds to the tune of like billions of dollars. So that's where the joke comes from, is like, oh, well, we're cash strapped because you guys aren't paying your bills. So maybe we just don't have the money to run the escalator anymore. That's the idea there.
Right. And so Trump sat down also with Zelensky for a conversation and then posted on Truth Social what seemed to many people to feel like a total 180 on Ukraine war policy. We can put A4 on the screen. This is from Donald Trump saying, after getting to know and fully understand, I can't even read this, Krystal. It's just so, I don't even, what's the right word for it? It's so transparent. Fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation. And after seeing the economic trouble it was causing Russia, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight and win all of Ukraine back in its original form. With time, patience, and the financial support of Europe, and in particular NATO, the original borders from where this war started is very much an option. Why not? He goes on to say Russia's been fighting aimlessly for 3.5 years. It talks more about that. This caused, understandably, an immediate sort of chaos in the news cycle. People said, is the U.S. policy on Ukraine completely changing? Which, of course, you have to read into the President of the United States, his posts and his statements on this. And you can't ignore it. Krystal, my immediate reaction was A, like, what the hell? And B, that Trump is at the United Nations making this pitch that he's the big peacemaker. He's talking about how he solved all of these conflicts. That was another part of his speech. It was actually a big theme in his speech. And he's surrounded by world leaders that he wants to have the, respect is not the right word. He wants them to sort of kiss the ring. And there he is, frustrated that he's not able to get an end to this conflict, and decides to try a new tactic and just be like, yep, original borders, that's what we're fighting for in Ukraine now. Everything that we've said up to this point about negotiating, nope, we're going to stay in it until Zelensky has every inch of the original border, which is like sort of the John Bolton dream. It sounds pretty obviously to me like a transparent negotiating tactic that I compared it when we were talking yesterday to when like a 5-year-old learns how to do up high, down low, too slow. And you've done it like 20 times with them, and they still think they got you. They're like,
that
too
you're not
slow.
Gonna get it.
Yeah. It just sort of felt like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's been all over the place with regard to Ukraine and Russia. And, I think really believed that he had this special relationship with Vladimir Putin and that he could use his grand negotiating skills to come in and that this would be easy to solve. And it's anything but easy to solve. It's not it's not an uncomplicated situation, especially, at this point in the conflict. So where you would have to force Ukraine to take some very significant concessions that would be ugly and that would be, frankly, wildly unjust. I mean, that's where we are. And he has, he's not been willing to do that. And so now we're back to like the most sort of hawkish hardline position. And it wasn't just this. There was also a joint, I don't know if you call it a press conference, but a brief press avail with Zelensky himself. And Trump got asked, okay, well, if you've got NATO countries and Russia's flying drones over them, what should they do? And he said, well, they should shoot them down. And even Zelensky looked sort of surprised that he made that comment at that moment because, of course, if you get a NATO country dragged into this, then you have significant treaty obligations from the United States of America, which is why this is all so incredibly fraught and incredibly dangerous. So I can only imagine how much Saagar is losing his mind right now about this complete and total 180 from Trump based on some of the comments that he made on the campaign trail, although I have to say even on the campaign trail, he was never completely consistent. But this was a major issue with the Republican base. They really thought that the Biden approach to Ukraine had been a disaster. They really wanted someone to come in and force a negotiated solution on Ukraine. It seemed at the beginning, after that like Oval Office blow up and, public humiliation ritual of Zelensky, that perhaps that was the direction that things are headed in. And now you've got, like I said, a complete 180 here to the most hawkish possible position. Because I assume when he says, the original lines, I assume he means Crimea as well, which is a wild position to take. And let's also be clear that, if he's serious about that, and I think you're right, it's a negotiating tactic, but we also have to take, this president does some wild things and we have to take him seriously at his words at this point. What the requirement from U.S. involvement in order to actually effectuate that outcome, it would be extraordinary. Would be absolutely extraordinary at this point. Now, he's right that Russia hasn't made like tremendous gains in the last little while. I wouldn't say it's a total stalemate. They have made some gains and they have more both manpower and, industrial capacity and resources to be able to drag this thing out and prevail in the end. But yeah, what he's floating here would be incredible escalation in terms of U.S. involvement if he's actually serious about that outcome.
And in a nuclear conflict, again, that it seems so ridiculous to say that, but a potential nuclear conflict. And Trump, one of the places he does talk more sensitively about is, or one of the areas in which he is, I think, more attuned to the general public than your average politician here in D.C., is that it's not a joke to mess with other nuclear powers, and saying that you're going to fight for every inch of Ukraine's original border is messing with other nuclear powers in a negotiating tactic. He's like Jekyll and Hyde, but it's like John Bolton and Tucker Carlson. You never know exactly what you're going to get with Trump. One day he sounds like Tucker, and the other day he sounds like John Bolton. Obviously, I think we're always rightfully cover it as his sometimes very thinly veiled negotiating methods, but it still obviously has a serious effect. And my last takeaway before we bring the guest in is, I think, just wrapping a bow on all of this, the man really wants a Nobel Peace Prize. He really wants a Nobel Peace Prize. And
we did the typical Trumpian thing of being like, I should get a Nobel Peace Prize for this. Not that I care about the awards. It's not about that. It's about the people. It's about bringing peace to the people. And it's like, in his, of course, list of the conflicts that he's allegedly solved, he includes, Iran and Israel as if, that they're all best friends now. We're never going to have a flare up then again, even as Israel is like preparing right now to bomb Iran again, likely, and drag us right back into this whole thing. He includes in there the India-Pakistan ceasefire, which both India and Pakistan are like, bro, you had nothing to do with this. So in any case, if you're wondering how legit his claims are to be such a great peacemaker, I offer you those two examples as emblematic of the, accuracy of the speech overall.
Well, let's get to Gaza and bring our guest in.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.